But I want to point out that's not enough to solve the problems of large-scale technological change. You need research, development, demonstration, regulation, public knowledge, public acceptability, testing, monitoring. It's a system approach. And inherently, the initial investments in any new technology are public goods, not private goods. They don't give a return to those making the investment. No private company can develop these technologies on their own profitably. They need public partners. And even with the tax, it's not enough, because the first movers are going to lose. They won't get property rights. They'll get a lot of learning that will be available for everybody. So my point is, large-scale technological systems change requires some clever policies on research and development and demonstration and regulation and promotion, feed-in tariffs, subsidies for consumers, first mover advantages, plus a proper pricing of the externality of greenhouse gas emissions. All of those things. And over time, there are so many wonderful things we can do to change the way we build our homes, the cars we drive, the way we power our cities and our economies, that can solve these problems. We can reduce T in the iPad equation. We can achieve economic growth at much lower impact on the planet if we think clearly, systematically, in systems terms, with a new kind of market and government approach, public-private partnerships, targeted to achieve shared global goals. That's what we need to do in the age of sustainable development. Finally, where are we right now on this? We are not where we need to be. The way we structure the global negotiations is not right. Climate change is not a poker game where you hold your cards close to the vest and you bargain with others. That's how we're viewing the negotiations leading up to Copenhagen. Don't reveal your hand, don't say your position, because it's viewed as a negotiation. If there is a model for it, it is the trade negotiations. That's the model people have in their heads. That's the wrong model for this problem. The climate change problem is not a trade negotiation in any way. The climate change problem is simply the most complex engineering, economic, and social problem that humanity has ever had to face together. And so we are well before the stage of negotiating. We should be at the stage of joint problem solving. All cards should be on the table. And we should be discussing, what can we do? The U.S. should be saying, well, here's how fast we think a plug-in hybrid can be introduced. Here's what we think we can do on nuclear power. Here's what we think we can do in tapping solar power from the Mojave. Europe should be saying, well, we have the Desert Tech project to link solar in North Africa with Europe's energy needs. It's $400 billion. We're thinking about making that investment. And if the new technologies for electric vehicles come along, we could do the following in our timetable. And China could say, we are a coal-burning economy. 80% of our electricity comes from coal. More than 50% of all our primary energy needs come from coal. So we're ready to take the lead in testing carbon capture and sequestration. And we're going to put 4 plants around to see about our geologic capacity to capture our CO2. Then we'd start getting somewhere. Rather than having only diplomats around the table, with all due respect, diplomats. We need engineers around the table. We need scientists around the table. We need hydrologists around the table. I'd even allow 1 or 2 economists around the table to try to ask how much it might cost for different options. But I frankly don't understand doing this, holding up the cards as if this is a poker game. It's too complicated. This is a poker game where the people holding the cards don't even understand the rules of the game. How can they? It's like playing poker, but you don't know which poker game you're playing. It's too complicated for that. We need to put the cards down and have a new kind of process. I've wanted all this time that the Secretariat of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change have a standing, large, technical body. Technical. That is spilling out options, doing costing, asking what Tunisia could do. What's the option for this one? Is Desertec a good idea? What is plausible for the next 5 years in such and such country? To my mind, by the way, in that context, the issue of whether a national goal is binding or not is one of the least interesting questions. First of all, what's binding if you can't achieve it? So if we don't know what's achievable, what's all the talk about legally binding? It's silly. We constantly agree to things that aren't achievable and aren't achieved. Well, we should be talking about not the debate of what's binding and what isn't binding, but what can we do? What can we do now? What could we do in 5 years? What could we do in 10 years? How can we get this moving? Once we analyze those options, then we can talk about how to share the costs too. Because there's no doubt that the rich world must fund a significant part of the incremental costs of this effort. Absolutely no doubt about it. But we're debating hypotheticals right now, not practicalities. We're debating concepts that barely have a real-life counterpart right now. Because what are these plans the way they are right now? They're not based on real technological possibilities. They're not based on brainstorming, sharing technologies, creating global platforms for electric vehicles or carbon capture and sequestration, and the like. So I keep saying, though not to much effect, we don't need global negotiations right now as much as we need global brainstorming and global problem solving. We need to get the world's minds together to solve these problems. That's a quite different exercise. Later on, we'll figure out how to allocate the cost once we know what we're doing. But we're not even at the point of really knowing what we're doing yet. We could be there, but we're not there. And finally, we need to get on with it for the ecological stability. And for that, I mean our children's future. Because what we're doing is reckless right now. And I'm reminded in this regard always when people ask me, well, could we ever agree to these things? Could we ever really reach a consensus? I'm always reminded of the words of John F. Kennedy in what I regard as the greatest speech of an American president in modern times, which was his speech on peace at American University in June 1963. And he said, "So let us not be blind to our differences, but let us direct attention to our common interests and to the means by which those differences can be resolved. And if we cannot end now our differences, at least we can help make the world safe for diversity. For in the final analysis, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit this small planet. We all breathe the same air. We all cherish our children's futures, and we are all mortal." Thanks very much.